discussion. First up, helping lead today's call is Executive Vice President at Nations Lending, Eric Roman, fellow Clevelander. Hey, Eric, how's it going today?
Hey, guys. Doing well. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Eric. Also joining us from the land of the sun, I believe, or in the desert, President of Inventive Technologies, Robert Moore. Hey, Robert.
Hey, Tom. Thanks.
Thank you. And also leading today's discussion is Chief Sales Officer at First Federal Bank of Kansas City, home of the defending NFL champion Kansas City Chiefs, Barry Cooper. Hey, Barry, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks, Tom.
Well, thank you to each of you, and we're extremely grateful for you each taking the time out of your busy schedules to lead today's discussion for the benefit of our members at TMC. So on that note, let's dive right into the discussion. If you would, perfect. So, obviously cyber attacks have been, a point of emphasis, particularly amongst our members of late, with having a lot of their staffs transitioning either temporarily or potentially more permanently to a remote environment, and our member organizations looking for best practices resources to make sure that they've got the infrastructure and protocol in place to best support their teams and not become, a victim of any potential cyber-related attacks. So on this slide listed out some of the more popular schemes that we're hearing specific to the mortgage industry. I guess, Eric, I'd like to start out with you here. Maybe you can provide some perspective for what you're seeing, from an IMB perspective at Nations Lending, from some of the fraudulent-related schemes that are coming across your team.
Yeah, you got it. So very familiar with all these. I think the thing that we're seeing the most is the phishing scams. We've been getting some pretty sophisticated spear phishing attacks where somebody may impersonate or spoof someone like our CEO or our president, CFO, maybe contact our controller and ask for some wires to be sent, data to be released, to a third party, things like that. That's what we see the most of. We've been very fortunate on some of the other things listed here that we haven't had any incidents or anyone trying to penetrate on those other types of scams.
Appreciate the perspective, Eric. Barry, I'd be interested in same kind of question from your perspective at First Federal of Kansas City. What you're seeing from, as a depository, prevalent fraud schemes within your operation.
Yeah, I think, thank you. I think Eric, he really nailed it. I mean, from a wire fraud scheme perspective, they're always kind of a constant concern. And though during the kind of COVID outbreak, we haven't seen a huge uptick in those, I'm anticipating at the tail end as we begin to reopen that we're going to see some of that. I agree with him as well that, what the vector we're really seeing the most uptick in is phishing, spear phishing, whaling. This type of activity has basically been focused on our institution internally to a certain extent, and even our older demographic of our customer base. And, they usually take the form of, some sort of coronavirus preventative medical procedure or a cure or a potential cure. That's the lure that gets folks to click. I think a secondary tactic that we've seen is soliciting for donations, because right now everyone, they want to help, they want to be helpful. It's in our nature as human beings. So folks are using that our attackers are using that to prey on folks. And I would say, in all of these areas, we're expecting to see an uptick as we begin to reopen and we get into that world.
That's a great point. Especially to your point is, we see more applications pop up, shelter-in-place orders start to continue to scale back. There's that appetite for the purchase environment to come back to the forefront. Makes a lot of sense that you see an influx in different scheme types.
Yeah.
Robert, from your perspective, you work with a lot of mortgage lending institutions and helping build out their infrastructure from an IT and cyber standpoint. Are you seeing, current trends towards any particular fraud schemes over the last 6 to 8 weeks reflective of this current environment, maybe that Eric or Barry didn't touch on?
Well, Eric and Barry touched on the primary uptick that we are seeing. It's the same type of thing. It's the spear phishing. It is really on the increase. They are, doing takeoffs on the COVID themes. What we are seeing is, what was mentioned in terms of the charitable phishing scams. We are also seeing an uptick in sort of the news scam for, if you want to get better data, if you want to find out what's really going on, so they're kind of spoofing a news supplier and saying, click here to get, real-time data on what's happening in your state, and it's a phishing scam. The only other thing that we've seen an uptick in just very recently, of course, relates to what's happening in the servicing arena. So we're seeing our first signs of the forbearance phishing scams. So just something I think all of our lenders should be on the lookout for.
That's a great point. And, another area where, as more forbearance requests come into play, or lenders are dealing with the servicing of those in real time, makes itself prone to more fraud-based attacks. I appreciate that perspective. And so if you would proceed to the next slide here, kind of related to these popular schemes, I'm going to start with Eric and then ask a similar question of Barry. Maybe I'd love if each of you could share some perspective on processes or some best practices that each of your organizations have put in place to help safeguard, the company as well as employees against being exposed to different schemes.
Yeah, when we think about security, we think about it in layers. There's no silver bullet. The first and most important thing for us is training. And I was telling Tom earlier, training, right? So when you think about breaches, you could have the best security tools in the world, best systems in place, but a lot of the breaches come through human error or being tricked into something, social engineering, things like that. So we focus a lot of energy on training. We've increased our training from like annual to a quarterly training. We put posters in our office and we refresh those often. And we do things like simulated phishing attacks internally to our own employees. And that really helps to, just really raise awareness, right? And give these folks the tools to question, to hover over links, do things like that. And then behind that, there's several layers of different services. We're a Microsoft shop internally, so we use Office 365, but behind that, we've got a antivirus, we've got a mobile device management tool. One of the biggest things that we use, and probably the least expensive, is multi-factor authentication and protecting everyone's identity. So when you log into one of our systems, you have a authentication app on your phone, or you get a text message and you have a second form of authentication, and that really helps protect us. But again, it's training and layers for us.
Well, we were cracking up earlier and kind of talking about this discussion. You mentioned even putting signs up in the employee bathrooms, and I laughed, but it made a lot of sense. You got to put it in places where you can drive the messaging home to your teams, and we all know where we end up at one point or another in the day. So I thought that was creative.
It's effective.
Right. Barry, I'd be interested your perspective and what you and your team are doing at First Federal of Kansas City to help mitigate cyber threats.
Yeah, you bet. I think, Eric and I are just kind of violently aligned on these topics, if you will, that, you really need to have good, strong MFA, multi-factor authentication in place. And the training piece of it is just so hypercritical Because I think it's one of those things to easily be kind of, hey, it's another thing in my training stack that I have to cover off. So, it kind of starts at the top as well. So I just encourage organizations to, really invest in their programs and have a programmatic approach. I love what Eric said about, hey, we used to do it annually, but this is so important that we want to drive our click rate on phishing emails down, that we're going to begin to do this quarterly, or, even monthly. Some institutions are doing that. In our case, we look at virtualization as a real asset. So what I mean by that is utilizing desktop as a service for remote users. So they, utilize even their home computer, or even if it's an institution computer. And on that, they essentially launch a virtual desktop. And in that environment, they're very limited on what they can do. They can't save data out of that virtual environment to their desktop. So they, anything that would be infected potentially, whether it's web browsing, et cetera, is going to be contained in that one virtual system. So we've utilized some of those as well, some of those technologies, and building our technology stack to be able to, mirror what we do in office and out of office, with virtualization. And then a second point for us is like enterprise managed detection and response, or managed services there, that utilize, kind of very sophisticated data analytics on the back end that allow for some minor changes to your infrastructure based on, your current attack vector, or something that is in real time, 0-day happening right now. So I would just encourage institutions to look into, MDR, EMDR, managed detection and response capabilities, and virtualization, as a strategy to make your remote employees even safer than they are now.
Oh, that's a great point, and I appreciate you going through that at length for us. I said I was going to hold the questions off till the end, although I did have one come up specifically related to some of the opening comments that I thought would be interesting to touch on real quick. Robert, you mentioned, starting to see some cases of fraud schemes in relation to, a lot of the forbearance-related inquiries. And I'm curious if you wouldn't mind if you could elaborate a little bit maybe on some specifics or specific examples of potential fraud that your clients have come across related to the forbearance process.
I'd be happy to. Although it's just starting, we're seeing a few different tactics here. One is promising mortgage relief, and usually on the two we've seen so far, that's involving they're requesting them to sign over the title. In another case, they're asking for sensitive information, confidential information, so that they can then leverage that to get access to their accounts. But for the most part, they're looking for a way to get that person to sign over the title. They tell them in one case, they said it's temporary. Don't worry, we'll allow you to get your title back once this virus passes and whatever. So they're definitely working on trying to get that title transferred, or to get access to your accounts through your confidential passwords and socials, things like that.
Yeah, it's kind of been somewhat of a prevailing issue to the industry prior to COVID, but I think definitely seeing a bit of an increase, or at least expect to. Have you seen anything on the kind of the forbearance side related to a wire fraud, as far as the instructions go in the closing process?
No, we haven't seen that yet.
Okay.
Just the normal wire fraud schemes that we've all seen for some time.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, it'll definitely be something we'll keep our ear to the grindstone too, for what our members are telling us as the weeks and months proceed. So Robert put together for us, in preparation for this discussion, a great overview of actually 18 steps to make your remote office more secure and convenient. And I thought it'd be a great exercise as part of this discussion to spend a little bit of time going through those best practices to share with our attendees here. So if you would transfer over to the next slide. Robert, we'll go through these kind of basically 3 best practices per page here, and would love, if you could kind of take the lead talking through each, or any anecdotal information that you would add towards each step in this process.
Okay, I'd be happy to. Some of these are common sense, some of these are more convenience related, several definitely are security related, but we put this together to help our clients as they send their workforce home. You encounter a whole bunch of new issues and problems with that. You thought you had cybersecurity issues at the office, you really have cybersecurity issues when you send your workforce home. And as we touched on in our earlier conversation, people remain our weakest link. And so some of these address that aspect of it as well. So let me just jump right in and we'll try to go over these relatively quickly. The first one's the convenience. You can overwhelm your IT help desk by sending people home with their monitors and laptops and docking stations, and they have no idea how to hook it back up. So we've encouraged all of our people to take pictures of the back of the computer and of the cable connections, all that sort of thing. Just helps, because you're not going to have that IT person on site to help you. One of the best defenses against cybersecurity attacks, whether you're at the office at home, is making sure that your computer is up to date. So it's very important that you work with your employees to make sure that they stay updated. Hopefully your organization has controls in place and does automatic patching, all of that. If they do not, you need to contact your IT department or your managed service provider to make sure that that happens. Related to that, you've got to make sure that your malware, your antivirus software, all of that is as up to date as possible. These are just, the right of entry for protecting your employees' desktops and your corporation. So pretty straightforward stuff, but it's so important and essential. We could go to the next slide. What you want to do here is make sure that you're uninstalling any unnecessary software from your personal computer. This is more prevalent if perhaps they're using their own device at home. Hopefully you're not doing that. I wouldn't recommend that as a practice, but again, I have seen some of our clients that pretty much allow employees to put about anything on their work computers. You should have a policy against that, and you should try to get them to remove any unnecessary software. All of that, of course, just opens you up to more susceptibility to malware. Again, very black and white, pretty straightforward. Always use the VPN for connections at all times. This is a simple little thing as well, but again, it's a fairly large security breach. Is a lot of us turn on automatic connections on our home Wi-Fi. We don't want to have to select the network every time we come in, or maybe every time we don't do it anymore, but when we used to go to Starbucks, we would automatically connect to the network there. That provides a really easy way for a hacker to spoof that network and then to gain access to your computer and your personal information. So it's just good practice to turn that off at this point. This one probably will require a significant amount of help from your IT staff or your managed service provider, but it's a very, very good practice. But when you have remote workers, have them separate the business at work from their personal stuff. So create a separate network for each. Just make sure that that confidential data that you have on your computer doesn't get exposed through what the kids or the wife or whoever else is working on the network at home. And the next slide is, or the next item is lock your computer. I think we all know this. We've all been told this a number of times. Just make sure you do that when you walk away. Another really good practice at home is to create a different user account for the rest of your family or any friends, in-laws, whoever might stay with you for a protracted period of time. Create separate user accounts, and that's going to increase the security on your home network. We always highly recommend using a password manager. I can't tell you how many people we come across that have the Excel file or the Word file at home with every confidential password, account number, account names, and then they go that extra step and they label it confidential account passwords or password file or account file. So look into one of the good password managers and use that to handle your passwords if at all possible. Another thing that you should do is ask your IT department or your MSP about securing what is called the DNS settings. We or your IT department can provide generally a tools and software that will help you. What this is basically just going to do in layman's terms, keep you from going to places that you shouldn't. So a little extra level of protection. Make sure you're using either Google Chrome or Firefox as a browser. Don't use, obviously, Internet Explorer. Extremely insecure, and it's out of date, been replaced, not getting updated. So try to use that. Be careful about any extensions you're using with any browser. If in doubt, ask your IT department, ask your managed service provider, is this one okay to use? Just be careful with that. Common sense. Always think twice. Take a deep breath before you click on anything, before you open anything. Eric touched on this earlier, take the mouse and hover over the link and look at it. Is it something that you recognize? Is it your domain? If you have any doubt, don't click. Ask your IT professional for advice and help. As we've all talked about, the phishing scams will spoof your CEO, your CFO. It'll look like that email address is accurate. Again, hover over the link, make sure that that is truly the correct email. Again, take a deep breath, step back, think about it. Any doubt at all, don't move forward, don't click. So, and that just comes to one of the final points, just always reach out to your IT staff. For example, with Eric and Barry, these are two great sources at their companies. Most everywhere I've been, you've got great IT help. We're always open for questions and advice. Just stop and ask if you have any concerns. So that very quickly are just the 18 steps. I think we're making this available. If this helps you all, feel free to use it. We just want to help out during this time, help you be more secure with your remote workforce. I just want to reiterate too, just again, people are the weakest link. Train, train, train. Eric's just nailed that on the head. Do all you can to, because that's generally your weakest point. That's where the hackers are going to come in.
No, I appreciate you going through that, Robert. That's a great point. So we will definitely share that as part of the follow-up to the attendees for opportunities that they can institute in their own operations. You kind of brought it up here at the tail end. It was something I wanted to ask of. I guess I'll start with Barry and then Eric. First and foremost, is there anything that, Barry, you're doing in your shop at First Federal Kansas City, maybe that we didn't cover in Robert's very comprehensive 18 steps?
No, I mean, I think there's, it just depends on the tech stack that you have deployed as well. There's always going to be nuances to the type of software you're using. Some shops may be O365, like Eric. There still may be traditional like email servers on-prem. There could be a lot of institutions that are using Gmail or some sort of email off of the internet system. So I think, it's all going to be, based on your institution. So I think those are great tips that Robert gave, and I don't see any holes in that at all. I think if we could figure out the human part of this, then I think, from a cybersecurity perspective, the IT people would be much more comfortable. So, yeah, so I don't see any gaps there at all.
That's a great point. And we kind of talked about this in the lead up to this discussion. And Eric, I'll start with you here. As Robert mentioned it in his piece, and Barry just piggybacked on it. The human element creates the biggest vulnerability. So I'm curious at Nations Lending, maybe you could tell us or provide some example, kind of what you're doing or your team's doing, as far as, internal phishing campaigns or other methods to test internally and, try to expose any vulnerabilities before real cases come in.
Yeah, so we do some of the simulated phishing. We actually took and replicated some of our authentication into our systems, created a landing page that looks fairly similar to what we do at the corporate level. But we made some telltale signs that, if you paid attention in the training, you should look for, whether it was, I think we took one letter out of our domain. So at nationslending.com, we took the G out and we sent them to a page, had them authenticate. And you'll be surprised, how many people will click through and give you their password. We made it very similar to what you see in our Office 365 landing page and log in, but then remediate, right? And then just coach those people up and let them know like where they might have missed some of those telltale signs, and help to really just raise awareness. And that's the key for us, right? Just reinforcement and awareness.
And then Eric, with those, with the internal kind of test phishing schemes, is that something you continue to do on a regular basis, just to, not only see how many people will click through, but in efforts to try to see what the results are of the training and different efforts you're putting in to kind of drive down those click-throughs?
Yeah, I think Barry mentioned earlier, his organization got down to 3%, and that's a really phenomenal number. We're doing the same thing. We want to drive those numbers down. The last one we did, we actually played off of the COVID pandemic, and we did some targeted things from, I knew the phishing campaign was going on, but I didn't know what it was. I wanted to see, if they could trick me also. But the last one we did was like a Walmart outreach, and people just clicked into it, and I spammed it, but we're constantly trying to trend those numbers down on the click through.
Yeah, I think there's real quick, I wanted to add, I think there's some great gamification, if you will, you can do on this. The tool we use internally has a plug-in directly to Outlook, and you can report this as a potential phishing email. You get a little bit of a high five, or you get some recognition if you're the one who's identified a potential phishing email. So, again, that brings it a little closer to home to the user as well. And I like to always, just encourage our user base to personalize this, and, not only think about, the institution, which this is where they work, but what about at home as well? I mean, we all have bank accounts that we use. We're all using all kinds of applications online. What are we doing to make sure that we're, following best practices and not getting lost in the morass of, clicking and getting lost in that world. So Eric, I think it's right on. I mean, I think a good, strong preventative program, reinforcement, that's just the way to go. It sure is.
I love the gamification idea.
Yeah, great idea. Tom, we also had a case where we were working with a mortgage client with a more typical wire fraud scheme like we've seen, and it was about the fourth time it hadn't involved the same people every time, our entities, if you will. So we were working with Title and the builder and others to try to narrow this down. We actually, in a sense, gamified it. If we did a reverse phishing scheme, so we created a dummy loan and dangled the bait out there. And we're still waiting to see what happens, but we're doing reverse phishing to try to track down who's involved in the wire fraud scheme.
I really appreciate that, Robert. I'm going to try that one myself.
Yeah, we got kind of excited. We were having fun setting that one up.
Well, it's usually this point that, you know, if you can incentivize the employees to not only be vigilant in reporting, you know, anything malicious or, you know, not quite up to snuff that they're seeing, you know, the minimal cost of that is, you know, exponential in comparison to what you might be paying on the back end to, you know, for software updates or additional infrastructure, or, you know, even just any victimization from once that exposure to, you know, in particular, a phishing scheme has already taken place.
Tom, that's a good segue. I didn't mention it earlier, but cybersecurity insurance is it's another thing to help kind of mitigate some of those expenses when you do have a breach. And you know, there's a bunch of different coverages, but like you should look for ones that kind of cover all the main schemes. You know, the ransomwares, the spear phishings, the social engineering, and just make sure you understand if there's any preemptive services that go along with that policy. You know, what kind of deductibles are going to be due if you do have a breach, and like, you know, what's covered.
Yeah, that's a great point, Eric. And just from the limited exposure I've had, you know, what you're going to be on the hook for a deductible or premium is going to pale in comparison to, you know, what you can expose yourself to for being victimized on the back end for, you know, a litany of losses or related costs to reinforce that infrastructure. That's a great point. So with this slide, before we kind of turn it over for questions for the attendees, real briefly wanted to touch on, you know, maybe what could be coming up as far as potential schemes, and maybe not so much COVID related, but also a, you know, upcoming front here for fraud related issues. Just want to share a quick stat that I had seen an article the other day from the Federal Trade Commission, where since January 1, they've seen 18,000 COVID-related fraud reports, you know, and those losses equaling more than $13 million out to the fraudsters. And that's, you know, if you think of, since things really started to ramp up in mid-March, you know, probably predominantly over this last 6-week period. So it's probably only a drop in the bucket as to what we can expect to see over the coming spring and summer months and beyond, you know, depending on the atmosphere of our workforce, as well as, you know, programs related to COVID. So it's very important to, you know, understand what the potential losses could be to your organization. We kind of talked at the beginning about some forbearance related fraud schemes, and in our prep discussion for this call, Barry brought up a great evolving, you know, scheme front to be considerate of, and that would be related to cryptocurrency. And Barry, I wanted to cede the floor to you for a minute here, just to, you know, maybe add a little bit more color to that and what you know, our fellow members could potentially be on the lookout for.
Yeah, you bet. It's just something I keep my eye on. And, you know, I was telling you guys earlier as well that I'm a bit of a dabbler in the cryptocurrency environment, so maybe I'm a little bit biased here. But I think anytime that you can incent someone to take action remotely through social engineering, phishing, spear phishing, whaling, whatever methodology you can use, and if you can get them to commit to a payment of some sort, that is, you know, that's the holy grail for an attacker, if they can get you to do that. Well, you know, the FBI has had recently has been asking in this COVID world that you may see some fraud and some cryptocurrency fraud schemes that are applicable to investments, even potentially, again, COVID treatments where, hey, if you give us some Bitcoin to, X number of Bitcoin, we will give you a potential COVID treatment or cure. Blackmail, is a big thing here as well. We know dirty secrets about you. We've seen your browsing history. We know what, blah, blah, blah. So if we know that you need to deposit 250 Bitcoin now, or we're going to disclose that to your social networks, your institution, et cetera. And I think, again, these social engineers, they like to prey on people's best, say they're better angels, right? So in a lot of cases, it's, hey, I want to be charitable as well. So they will say, these crypto fraud schemes are going to be, hey, you know what? We really like to try to save the COVID infected whales as well, or whatever it is, right? So why don't you, dump 1,000, Bitcoin into this account to do so. So, this is something if your financial institution is not into this, and I can tell you that ours really, crypto is not in our kind of plan overall, but it is a scheme that your potential customers and even your employees in your bank could be seeing in the future. So just something to keep your eye on. It's something that I keep my eye on. Just as crypto matures and we see where that platform goes in the future, we could see a lot more, and we will see, I think, a lot more fraud schemes that revolve around cryptocurrency.
Absolutely. It's a great point as it becomes to be a more relevant form of currency in this ever-changing digital marketplace. Definitely something to be on the lookout for. We talked about it in the lead-up discussion. Doesn't sound like it's made its way to the forefront yet, maybe because of the recency or just due to, where the source of these kind of schemes may be coming from. But just two I wanted to mention for our members to be aware of and keep an eye out for. But hearing a lot of chatter in publications out there about potential schemes around the government stimulus checks or direct deposits that have gone out over the last couple of weeks, as well as related to a lot of the unemployment benefit checks or direct deposits going out. So for our members and their clients to be on the lookout for these related schemes and looking to authenticate those deposit informations as well as it may relate to a loan in process. Robert, before we open it up to questions, I wanted to cede the floor to you briefly if there was any closing advice that would be pertinent to share with our attendees here, as far as maybe some simple or easy steps or actions from an organizational standpoint for a lender to help protect their remote staff from being victimized.
I think we've done our guys have here, Eric and Barry, have done a great job of outlining what you need to do to protect your remote workforce, especially from a tactical viewpoint. If I have any recommendations for folks, for organizations today, I would say we need to step back and look at a couple of foundational things, if you will, that you need to have in place if you don't, from a cybersecurity viewpoint. And this isn't specific to the remote workforce necessarily, but I consider these foundational and you need to have these in place. First is to have a written information security program. This is an umbrella policy that covers all of your cybersecurity policies and procedures. You need to have that in place. A significant and important piece of that is your incident response program. If you do not have that, it's referred to as an IRP. Often, we have to have our acronyms in our industry, but that's extremely important. These days, if you're a small or a medium-sized IMB or a bank, you are going to get hacked at some point. You're going to have a cyber incident. What's extremely important is that you are prepared to handle that. And that includes everything from how you defend against the attack, how you remediate, how you seal the gap, if you will, but even more importantly, how do you deal with the press? How do you keep the media from, or your people from talking to the media inappropriately, especially people that don't necessarily know what's going on? So your incident response program is going to cover how you handle that, who's involved. It needs to consist of your senior management, your IT, and your attorneys, probably your marketing or whoever handles your PR, that type of stuff. We've seen with, you know, some very well-known, say, credit bureau companies, you know, that got hacked. One of their biggest mistakes was how they handled the response and how they dealt with the press, and that they didn't come clean for months. And then they also continued to add to their story as the months came along. So I just think those are foundationals. Those are extremely important. You need to have those policies, procedures in place.
That's a great point. Often overlooked is, you know, how do you combat the situation once you have been victimized? And to your point, you know, how you handle your messaging, your plan in place to, you know, reinstill confidence in your client base. All of those things and more are extremely important, you know, not only preparing in advance, but how do I react if by chance I am the victim from an organizational standpoint? So I appreciate that perspective.
And one last thing, if I may, Tom, just before,
sure.
Something else that's coming is that you need to have a pandemic response in your disaster recovery business continuity plan. So I just completed my first one for a client. The state auditors, federal auditors, regulators are all going to be looking for that coming up.
Yeah, it's a great point. You know, the existing disaster relief recovery plans probably in many cases aren't reflective of a, you know, pandemic type environment. So that's, we joked about that lead up to the call too, but a great point to make consideration for in building out future infrastructure. So on that note, I want to open it up to our attendees. Any questions that have for Robert, Eric, Barry, please feel free to submit those through the chat or Q&A function. As I'm laughing, I'm rattling off your names, and I realized I referenced an old Kansas City Chief, Eric Barry. But if you'll facilitate those questions through chat or Q&A function, I will present those out to our discussion leaders. What I had come in already, and I think it's more on a end user basis, if I'm using my own personal computer under my employer's VPN, and say I have my own antivirus software in place, and then have the company's business antivirus software, Robert, maybe you can take us through, how do you structure that? Do you need to go with the business antivirus program, or will, like if you've got your own personal program and then the business program, can those counteract each other and essentially work against?
That, I bet Eric has some great answers for that as well, but that's always a problem. You know, you can have conflicts between the different versions of software. Personally, I would recommend that you have a BYOD or bring your own device policy in place. We typically recommend to our clients that they not allow personal computers to use. Again, each company has nuances and differences, but we like to have control of the antivirus, the malware, the dark web monitoring, the spam filtering, so that we know it's up to date and it's in place and it's working. When you bring the personal computers in and they have their own versions, you kind of lose control of that, and you're not as, I don't think you're as safe anymore.
Yeah, I'd add, we prefer to use standardized equipment that the company issues. So I would completely agree, but in a modern workplace, you know, I get the need for BYOD or bring your own device. So we do allow it. We check and make sure that it meets minimum performance requirements, like the computer is going to perform in our environment. And then two, we'll enroll it in, you know, endpoint protection. So we have access over our data, control over it. You know, we can push down patches, software updates, make sure our antivirus is up to speed and on the machine and running. I really do appreciate and like the strategy that Barry suggested, where it's a virtualized desktop environment, you know, a lot more rigid, a lot more controls. You know, we would consider that in the future, but you know, for us, it's standardized on our equipment. We'll use BYOD as the exception, but you also got tablets and smartphones out there too. So enrolling those in some of our tools and protection really helps to mitigate that loss of data. Really is what we're concerned about the most.
And speaking of loss in data, you should make sure that all of your hard drives on your employees' machines are encrypted these days.
Great point. Another question that came in here, Barry, I wanted to put this in your camp first and foremost. What security concerns do you have, if any, for workers that return to an on-site work environment, if anything stands out from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, because I mean, this is going to end. I mean, the lockdown's going to end, right? And people are going to be coming back. And are they going to come back situationally aware? Are they going to be, you know, have security top of mind? Are they going to remember their training? You know, just to give Eric a shout out here, are they going to remember the training that they've had before? And then, you know, one of the things that we try to inculcate into our folks is that when you're working from home, you're still at work, right? It's a different physical location, but you're using the resources of the institution. So I would just say, from a security perspective, it will be, have bad habits been, you know, started when they're at home in a remote environment? Are they not, you know, are they maybe a little less reticent to do all the hygiene they need to do on their, you know, from a phishing email perspective? You know, I think some of those things, you know, would kind of worry me a little bit. I think the other thing would be is like policies that the institution, you know, it's easy to enforce when they're sitting right next to us here, right? And you're in the building, but you know, remotely, well, these policies, maybe they've waned somewhat, if you will. So I think, you know, it's all of that about coming back. Are they still situationally aware from a cybersecurity perspective? Are they remembering their training? And you know, what kind of bad habits are we seeing? If they're plugging something back into the system now that's been on their home networks for a while, you know, do we do a scanning policy from the get-go where they come in? Before we're gonna let you back on the network, we're gonna scan this device for, you know, malware, ransomware, you know, you name it. So those are some of the things that come to top of mind. I'm sure, you know, Eric and Robert, they may have other things as well, but those are things that I think about as we, you know, begin to move back from our work from home environment back to the corporate HQ.
Great point, Barry. And yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Eric, if there's any other specific security concerns that you have at Nations for having your staff come back on site in time.
Yeah, we made the decision to, in our local branches, continue to work from home through the month of May. You know, we all know that financial services is not required to be home, but we went above and beyond to kind of just protect our employees there and mitigate that risk to not only them, but their families. But think about physical security. You know, you're used to being in your home environment, you know, just some of the things that we, you know, had worked through with training in the past, like, you know, making sure that you're not allowing people to kind of tail you into entrances. You know, you have guests signing in, you know, some of the basics that you kind of forget, because, you know, when this is all said and done, our employees are going to be work from home for a minimum of 60 days, if not longer, just depending on when we go back. So, you know, in addition to what Barry suggested, just some of those physical securities.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great standpoint. I think of, you know, like a branch footprint in particular, and all the physical awareness securities that you have to have in place, and have your teams really in tune to, they come back to the forefront and can be easily forgotten once we get back to, more of an in-office type setting. Robert, as a wrap up the discussion here, anything you would add or advise towards your clients in mortgage banking for, security related concerns that they should be aware of and should address with their employees as they fluctuate back towards an in-office environment?
Nothing that Eric and Barry haven't covered already. I think they've nailed pretty much every concern. Just kind of comes back to training again, like Eric likes to say. So, we get them back in the habit of how to operate in the office environment again, best practices.
Excellent.
One thing I just may throw in, just anecdotally, that we're struggling with is, do we allow our customers and our branches with masks on? Just throwing that out there. Maybe we can take that under advisement from the group, but there's security concerns to that. So, I mean, the new normal is not like the old normal as well. So what are those things that COVID has brought to the table that we need to think about too, from branch delivery, et cetera. So sorry to jump in and throw something in at the end there, Tom, but I just wanted to, that's the thing we're struggling with. We got to make a decision on, what do we do?
There's
That's
a lot
great
of
point, just from a security standpoint. Go for it.
There's, I have another client that is, they have a branch manager that wants to reopen the office immediately, like as of last week, and he's encouraging employees to come back. And in state of Arizona, the governor has extended the stay-at-home policy. So we have employees going, I'm not comfortable coming back. So now what do you do? Now you have an HR issue. So there are a lot of questions that companies and employees face as we try to come back to work again.
Great point. We think so much about the financial standpoint of getting our businesses, either back up and running or continuing to operate or back to full steam. But there is so much nuance to policy and procedure that will have to be addressed and updated as we really think about, how we're still practicing safe hygiene related measures, but still being able to operate within a COVID environment, I guess you could say, until we have more of a vaccine in place. It's a great way to, great point to close out the discussion here. So on that note, gentlemen, I don't have any additional questions, so we'll wrap today. I want to, first and foremost, Eric, Barry, Robert, I want to thank each of you for taking the time out again to lead the discussion. Very insightful feedback and best practices for our attendees. So thank you to each of you, and thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today. It's not lost on us, how busy everybody is in this environment.
It was my pleasure. Thanks,
you.
Tom.
Pleasure.
Stay safe out there, everybody.
Everyone take care.
Thank you.